It gives me a great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all on the behalf of GRIHA Council. India stands at the threshold of profounding choices about the path to future development, and choice made today will determine India's mid and long-term progress. The country's economic growth trend, with average of 7.4% in a year in the last decade, will lead it to become the fourth largest economy in the world in about 2 decades. The positive prospects does not, however, come without the challenges, as the nation still faces a significant questions about rapid urbanization, resource scarcity, the high level of poverty. Systematic approach to urban planning, integrated with the application of circular economy principles to found the mobility systems, can create more resilient cities which could manage such challenges as and when they arise. The country has the opportunity to leapfrog other economies and establish a leadership position. Traditionally, the Indian economy has been one where reusing, repurposing, and recycling has been the second nature. In a world that is increasingly running out of natural resources, this thinking is an asset that must be leveraged by businesses, policymakers, and citizens in organized manner and expand, including the elements to make the economy truly circular. This session highlights the potential to innovate business models by accelerating cost savings, a new advancement in design, and practical solutions by adopting circular economy. We have a diverse set of panelists with us today. I would first introduce the thematic speaker of the session. She is a member of a Supreme Court Committee for Solid Waste Management. She currently lives in Bangalore and has a very strong technical background and experience in several engineering fields, paramedical knowledge, and on a wide variety of pollution-related issues. We are very honored to welcome Ms. Almitra H. Patel. Thank you for joining us today, ma'am. The next is the moderator of the session. He is a diplomat for 34 years and has represented India at several countries as an ambassador and secretary. He was an inaugural head of Mumbai campus of S.B. Jain School of Global Management and recently joined as an inaugural of Indian Country Director for the internationally ranked University of New South Wales, Sydney. Mr. Amit Dasgupta. Thank you for joining us, sir. The next speaker for the session is Dr. Milice Park. He is the Senior Lecturer of Industrial Design at the University of New South Wales and maintains his own design practice. Prior to joining to the university, Milice was a course leader for the Product Design Sustainable Future at the University of Creative Arts in UK, and he has worked in numerous design practices in the past 20 years. I welcome you, sir. The next speaker for the session is a data analyst by training. He's interested in social entrepreneurship, technology, urban planning, and informality, and a circular economy in the developing world. He's the founder of Kabadiwalla Contact and an award-winning social enterprises in the field of waste management. Mr. Siddharth Hande, thank you for joining us. The last but not the least, he has a career over 15 years and experience in bamboo architecture and 22 years in prefabricated technology. Mr. Sumit K. Agarwal, the CEO of Tanjun WonderBamboo. Thank you for joining us, sir. I would now hand over the session to the moderator to please take it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We look forward to a stimulating discussion. As you've seen, the speakers come with a formidable background and significant experience, many in completely new areas that we don't normally associate with. But I think with your help, we will try and make this as substantive a session as possible, but more importantly, as interactive one. To begin with, I would request the Honorable Almitra Patel ji to present her, to actually make the keynote address, if you like, and set the tone of today's discussion by talking about construction and demolition waste. Ma'am.
Just in case if you want to.
No, let them. All right. Next. I have a request to GRIHA. I know they have a lot of norms for how a building should be, but I wonder whether they have norms for how a building should be constructed. How much nuisance is caused to the public, to traffic and so on, while the building is going on, while the materials are on the pavement, often spilling onto the carriageway and public spaces. This is a picture showing how municipalities ought to be monitoring waste on the road, even for small sites, to keep it off the carriageway. And for all buildings, small or large, once you've removed the centering from the first slab, there's no earthly reason why you can't use the space below that slab for all your material and get it off public spaces and into your site. Next. Yeah. We have it in our construction and demolition rules. I don't know any city which has really begun to implement it. But globally, and I think our foreign speakers can guide us on this, major builders have to submit a waste management plan, which will spell out what waste, how much waste, where it will go, how it will go, and who will be responsible for its recycling or disposal. Our rules require it for large plots generating more than 300 tons per month of waste. And the waste management plan ideally should be submitted along with the plan sanction application. And the plan sanction can show that there will be a parking lot or a lawn or a sewage treatment plant in this or this area. But until that comes up, this is where this or that waste will be stacked pending off-site disposal. And the waste management plan should cover segregation, storage, collection and transport, and certified disposal. This is the tricky part. ULBs never want to have someone certify that something has reached a particular designated site, because no one wants to hang around at that site, and there's not much money to be made at that end, so it's a very neglected area. And just go back, have I? Yeah, so besides the plan, just some rough estimate, and I would welcome if there are any architects or builders in the audience. Do you agree with this, that there is around 5% wastage of every raw material, construction raw material, like sand, stone, concrete, blocks, bricks, etc.? Next. Now, if all of these different items are kept unmixed, there is a good use for every one of them. The most important thing is, when you're excavating foundations, please keep your top, up to 1 foot separate as topsoil for later gardening, instead of chucking everything and then ruining some hillside to buy red earth from outside. You can use the soil, other soil, also for contour landscaping and road shoulders, even a sound barrier if you're near a highway, make a high sort of a berm. all cementitious wastes, which means not just leftover ready-mix concrete and clean out from the ready-mix vehicle, but also spilt plaster, leftover, so on. And in the case of demolition waste, deconstructing the buildings so that you can keep the columns, beams, slabs separate, and send that even to a simple stone crushing unit for conversion to M-sand, manufactured sand, which costs 1/3 of river sand and saves the rivers. And it can very easily be used in all non-load-bearing work. The fired bricks can go for surki or walkways, the ceramic waste for China mosaic, or as aggregate to block makers. The glass, broken glass, can go for rat-proofing the concrete at the base of walls and so on. And of course, broken tile, stone, and so on for crazy paving. Other things get picked up by Kabadiwallas, which our friend Mr. Hande will tell us about. Gypsum is the difficult one. Yeah. Okay, next. Yeah. Now, the important thing is that once we keep all these things separate and entrepreneurs will come forward to recycle all these things, GRIHA and others must see that these manufactured things get lifted and off-taken. It's not an unreasonable target. In fact, there are some incredible targets that other countries have set and achieved also. 98% recycling in Singapore, Denmark 90%, Japan setting time-bound targets, California also. Now we need GRIHA to bring this culture by giving extra points for use of recycled waste, which is mandatory. There's one problem where the government needs to help because there's 18%, there's 5% GST on sand and aggregate, which is not considered a manufactured product. And then it shoots up to 18% for anything made into a block, a tile, a paver, and so on, which makes it uncompetitive with virgin ones. Next. Is that it? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Almitra ji. I'd like to begin with you, Miles, by asking a question. You've done a significant amount of work in the area of smart cities. And picking up from what Almitra said, in the whole design concept and understanding of smart cities, what do you feel is the role of managing waste? Is managing waste a matter of finding a way of disposing of the waste, or a way of recycling and using the waste? I ask this question mainly because of GRIHA 10's focus, which is on fostering partnerships for sustainable habitats. So in a sustainable habitat, how is waste to be handled?
Well, thank you for that question, and I'm sure there's many ways we could slice and dice it, because the sort of waste streams that occur within the built environment are diverse. We've just heard about construction waste, but equally we could think about household waste in terms of food, and also packaging and non-organic materials, plastics, huge problem. But equally, waste streams like electronic waste, e-waste, which is still the fastest growing waste stream and is probably the one that is the most troublesome when it actually gets into the environment, causing multiple health and problems for the people who deal with it, and equally for the environment in which, the surrounding environment which it ultimately contaminates. So how does smart cities start to engage with these various parallel streams of e-waste is a complex one. But perhaps just to break that idea of what a smart city is, and it's a word that often gets overused these days, is that smart cities usually implies that there's some engagement with technology and information systems and networks. And as such, that should mean that you have better ways to manage. I mean, that old adage that if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, I suppose, plays into the fact that the smart city, the notion of the smart city means that if you have intelligent systems that can gather information about waste accumulation, let's say we have smart bins with IoT, Internet of Things sensors that might feed back to a local council or an authority that can start to manage that, right through to citywide intelligence, looking at the way that we can understand where wastes are accumulating, where they're coming from, and indeed the flows of that. So to be non-specific in answering your question, I would say that there are lots of ways that the smart city can engage with that, but it would be primarily on the premise that if we can measure it, then perhaps we can manage it better.
Thanks, Miles. Siddharth, can I come to you you know, I mean, we talk about waste management and waste recycling, etc. And Miles raised the matter about measuring waste. Now, I think if you're going to handle waste, first we need to be able to understand the quantum of this waste. And when you're handling it, to once again go back to what GRIHA is talking about in terms of fostering partnerships, is this a collective responsibility? That we find a way of dealing with the waste that is generated. And could you tell us whether this kind of partnership, if such a partnership exists, whether you can actually build a viable business model that allows it to sustain itself? And perhaps you could share with the audience a story about the work that you do, why you do it, and whether you see a future in that work, not only in terms of the work, but for the people you work with.
Thank you very much. Firstly, thanks so much for having me. It's very exciting to be here and be a part of this conference. Just to kind of put my perspective on things, I think, you know, this question about waste management, it's time. It's time now to really understand and think that it is absolutely, we cannot do business as usual when we consider waste. For the longest time, you have this kind of linear model of, you know, in how you build your product and all of these kinds of things. And I think the circular economy really tries to disrupt that, or is saying that you can disrupt that. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation had the circular economy report for India, where they estimated about $1.8 trillion of opportunity for businesses and society to move to circular systems. And I think that one of the key things of circularity is you actually design out waste as much as possible, right? Now, how do you do that? One of the key things when you think of a product being used is you have to have a reverse mechanism to get that product so you can do something with it. So, for example, your kurkure, your chips packets, all of these kinds of things. Technically, if you had enough volume of that, you can send it to a cement kiln, and they use it as co-processing material, and it's kind of, you can tick some interesting boxes when you think about a circular economy principle. In the West, when you think about waste management, you normally have these centralized systems of waste management. And it's a very expensive process. The World Bank has estimated that for a municipality to manage its waste, it can cost anywhere between 20 to 50% of the municipal budget. That's absolutely not feasible. We need to think of different ways of managing the recovery and the reuse of waste. From our side, I run a company called Kabadiwalla Connect, which is a for-profit social enterprise. We have found a lot of purchase in working with the informal sector in the recovery of waste in the city, trying as much as we can to integrate that existing robust ecosystem into formal waste management processes. And I can speak a lot about this happy to speak more, but I think I'll stop here just on the note that I actually feel that the informal sector in the developing world represents an amazing opportunity to build a decentralized supply chain around waste management, one that not only talks about waste being managed properly, but also talking about how do we hit sustainable development goals, about making, addressing this issue of high level of poverty and all of these kinds of things. So I think I'll stop there, but yeah, for me, the informal sector is kind of the most exciting aspect of what it could bring to the circular economy.
Thanks, Siddharth. This is really a way for the audience to get to know what a fantastic panel we have over here and how we can engage. And so I've been throwing questions at them to really demonstrate to you that the 1 hour that I spent with them prior to this session has been among the most enjoyable and informative for me. But we come to the next panelist, which is Sumit, and my question to you, Sumit, is that we are at the GRIHA summit, and actually we're talking about housing, etc. And if someone wants to build a house, you immediately think in terms of bricks and mortar and steel and this and that and God knows what and how much it's going to cost, etc. You've been doing work with bamboo, and the last GRIHA summit was based on the phrase, is sustainable affordable, and is affordable sustainable? And so my question really to you is twofold. One is breaking out of the box when you think in terms of building a house and saying that there is an alternative to the construction material. And second, is that alternative both sustainable and affordable?
Thank you, Amit, and thank you everyone for being here and for having me. I'll take the affordable versus sustainable first. Can we afford being in Delhi with the kind of pollution we have? How much are we willing to pay to get out of this? Now, affordability is a very, it's a term that can be used differently for different things. Can we afford not to have sustainable housing? Can we afford to continue growing the garbage dump at Ghazipur or anywhere else in Delhi? I only see Ghazipur when I come from Dehradun, so excuse me for that. The point is how affordable it is to be unaffordable. So that, if we can't answer that, then we got to be sustainable. And with your permission, I'd just like to show maybe 1 or 2 slides, and and probably at the end of it, if all the questions are not answered, I'll try and answer them once again. Sorry, I'm going to stand and speak. This is after lunch. I can't keep sitting and speaking. It's difficult. The role of bamboo in a circular economy, since we are on that subject here, till day before yesterday, I didn't know what circular economy was, frankly speaking, really. I never heard that word before, and I doubt I'm going to hear it very often in the next 1 year. But yeah, it's going to catch up, and finally we will talk about circular economy in the next 10 years maybe. But to me, I represent an organization called Tanjun, WonderBamboo. To Tanjun, a circular in any context would mean a zero. So the point is, can we have the next one? to me, what it would mean is let's use things, ideas, services, products, materials which have zero impact, zero waste, zero carbon footprint, and zero maintenance. And I'm a bamboo guy, so I'm just going to talk about bamboo. I don't know any other product very well, all right? My point is, if you see that slide, you'll see how bamboo grows in 4 years. Show me another material which grows in your garden that much in 4 years. Anybody know of any material which grows in your backyard that much? Secondly, to prove my point, I'll go from the illustration to the photograph. That's my garden, what you see at the bottom. And that bamboo thing grows 7 feet in 7 days. It's scary. So when I say I make a bamboo house, I regrow that house and 3 more houses that I sell in less than 3 years. So I've regrown my house, which I live in for the last 7 years, and sold 3 more houses from my garden. That is sustainable as far as I'm concerned. And if it's fitting into the circular economy, I'm very happy with it. If it doesn't, let me know. The point is, bamboo is a product, probably one of the many few products that is completely usable to the last fiber. You see the list on your right? So when you cut a bamboo culm, as it's called, it's about 25 feet long, and you use the middle portion, which is structurally good, to make a structure, make bridges, make houses, shelters, and you use the top portion, the top 6 feet, which is where it thins out, to make furniture, all right? You use the bottom portion to make artifacts, like lamps and ashtrays and pen stands and God knows what else. And when you have made all that and you've got leftover pieces, slices of bamboo, you make agarbatti sticks. And when those break, you make toothpicks. And when you can't have any more of breaking down, you have fibers left, you make fabric. There is bamboo fabric, and Amit shared with me that he has a bamboo fabric shirt from his days in the Philippines. And it's amazing to see someone use it. Bamboo fabric is available in Delhi, by the way. And it's a fantastic material to use. Cool in summers, hot in the winters. And there is something called Nayan Jyot that comes out of the eye of the bamboo. It's fantastic for your eyes. Okay, so there's medicinal use. When all that has happened and there's a lot of bamboo waste lying, you use it for making paper. And when you're finished with that, you use the rest of it for making compost. God, does it get any more circular than that? Tell me, anybody here? So that's one product. If we really start thinking about it and start, sort of using it in our daily lives, we can see that bamboo can be used to the last fiber. Next one, please. I have only 3 slides, so please don't go to sleep. Those are the houses that we make. You can see double-story houses. When you go to Mussoorie, you'll get to live in that hotel on the bottom right. When you go to Badrinath, you'll get to live in that hotel on the top left. And in between is the interiors. It's probably as good as any house that we live in. What we've done is we've created a bamboo ferroconcrete composite, and that is very, very sustainable. The bamboo is treated for 100 years, as FRI tells me, Forest Research Institute, Dehradun. I don't know that. I'm not 100 years old. But I know it's lasted me 10 years. No termites, no problem with any kind of rains or anything. So I think it's a good product. I can bet on it. The point is, now coming back to the GRIHA Summit bit about the sustainability, what Amit asked about, is that if we take all the roofs in New Delhi or Delhi and build with bamboo, irrespective of the structural constraints of that building, however old or however badly structured, bamboo is only 5% of the weight of a normal brick house. So when you go back from here, think of building a couple of rooms on your roof. It's not going to hit your structure, which means 30% more living spaces in the urban areas, 100% better living in the slum areas, and a long-lasting way of making public buildings happy places. Public buildings are very unhappy places. Many of you go to the RTOs and the other buildings of this world. They're not happy places. Bamboo is a very happy material. If you've ever sat in a bamboo grove, you would realize that it has a positive energy, and some of you spend thousands of rupees going and buying what we call the feng shui bamboo or something like that. Keep it at home so that you're happy. Grow bamboo on your rooftop. You'll be happy all the time. Okay? And as you can see, it's kind of good enough to live in. You and I can live in that. So the days of living in a bamboo jhopdi are over. We're talking about sustainable architecture, long term, 50 years. Okay? I'm talking of comfort. Now, how do we go about it? My only learnings for a circular economy from my own experiences would be, first of all, whatever you know, please make it copy left. I know I'm talking to Terry. They already understand this concept of copy left. I'm talking to Griha. They already know the concept of copy left. Copyright ने हमारी जान ले ली है. Everything is copyright. What for? Copy left is what is required. So if you're in any kind of space at any time and you know something about making a change in this world, go out and tell everybody. Copy left is what is going to create a circular economy, if there is one circular economy somewhere. I don't know about it. Skill development is the first step. Don't go out there and say, plumber nahi milte. How many times have you really given him enough money to go get himself skilled? Skill has to be the first step for any kind of economy. Circular, round, cuboid, rectangular, any kind of economy. Doesn't matter. You got to have skills. And man before machine. I love technology, but I don't love it more than I love my wife. So man, woman, everybody before technology. Let's love technology. My cell phone cannot be the love of my life. It's a good thing. It's a good tool. Love it. It's not the love of my life. Leaving you with that thought, a lot of questions is what I expect. One last slide. Now this is something which I'm requesting from Griha and from Terry. I'm going to connect you all the way back into the circle to what we do every day, driving home and driving from work and to work. We did a nice experiment in Dehradun with Tata Motors. During one of our events, which we call Greenstock, we do that every year with the Doon School and with the University of Canberra. Sorry about this, UNSW, but we're friends. So we do this, my miles are offset, and you know how interesting this is. When you buy a car, like I drive an SUV and talk about green things all the time. How inappropriate. Shouldn't be doing that. I should be driving a small little Reva or something. But the fact is that when I bought my SUV, I came to know that if you plant 26 broadleaf trees and they survive, then the 7-year life cycle of your SUV becomes completely carbon neutral. Now that's where Terry comes in and Griha comes in and tells me that, look, you buy a refrigerator or you buy a dishwasher or you buy an SUV or you buy a car, plant these many trees, let's get the NGOs together, and you become carbon neutral, which means that sticker on any car, which we put in Dehradun, says my miles are offset. I'm driving a vehicle where the carbon footprint is already nil. We can't stop development. No way we can do that. And we shouldn't. But we can develop the green cover along with the development. Nobody's stopping us from doing that. So I request all of you to think about this, provide us with study, with research, thought leadership, and big data, none of which we are good at. We make bamboo houses. We're very good at that. Randa chalwalo humse. Okay? But this is your job. So please help us. Can we go to the Hero Motors and say, can we go to the Honda Motors and say, look, Terry says that for every Honda City you sell, if we plant these many bamboos, then we'll not only have that much oxygen, but we'll also have that many houses. So when you buy a car, you're giving a house. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that what circular economy is all about? Thank you very much. Can we have the last slide? Tanjun, by the way, means simple in Japanese. Thank you.
Can you remain there?
Yeah, sure.
Could you go back 2 slides, please, where he showed, yeah, that's it. Now, I think it would be interesting, Sumit, if you were to share with, sorry, I beg your pardon, if you were to share with the audience, I'm looking at the bottom right, which would possibly be the, yeah, it's the bottom right building that you have there. How many bamboo trees would you have used to make that? And how many years would it have taken for the bamboo to grow?
All right. The slide before that shows that bamboo grows about that much in 4 years. So that's the answer to your second question. It takes 4 years to grow that house from the time you plant a bamboo culm. Bamboo is a rhizome-based root system. So you cut one and another one grows. Adrak ki tarah hai. It's like ginger. It's rhizomes. It's not a root system. So you cut one bamboo, you're not killing nothing. It's a grass. The next one will sprout from here. And by the way, bamboo is food. So if you don't want to grow bamboo, just cut it and make pickles out of it. Save it as bamboo shoots. The point is that this entire house can be grown by planting even one bamboo and waiting long enough. So if you planted one bamboo, you would wait 15 years. If you planted about 45, 50 bamboos, take you 4 years to have that many bamboos, which is nothing. I mean, 4 years is nothing to grow a house. Some of us are thinking of making a house when we grow up. You know, when we get older, or when we retire, or when we, you know, hit a certain milestone. Does that answer your question, Amit? Yeah?
Thanks, Sumit. I'll come back to you and the other members of the panel shortly. But before that, Almitra ji, I wanted to come to you because one of the things that we are faced with is the manner in which India, and indeed the rest of the world, is urbanizing. And if urbanization is a fact of life, if it's something that we just have to accept, what, in your view, would be some of the things that we need to be mindful about?
The first objection I have to your question is I don't think we have to take urbanization the way we are doing it now for granted. All the big cities are engulfing and absorbing their suburbs, their villages, and aggravating the problem of transport, water, wastewater, power, and pollution, concentration, and everything else. If we believe small is beautiful, let us just leave the suburbs and the perimeter to be small and managed as small towns and provide people what they need and why they prefer to be in a big city is mainly the connectivity and the infrastructure. Let's give it to them there where they are and not aggregate the management of such enormous spaces to one commissioner or one bunch of councillors, which makes it really unmanageable. That's the first thing. Secondly, if we want to accept the fact that urbanization is growing, we have to very consciously recycle our wastewater. I think this is going to be the most critical shortage for everybody. There are so many cities in India, people talk about getting water between 2 and 4 a.m. every third day, and that's inexcusable. I grew up watching a water tanker spraying the Bombay Queens Road and washing it every day. When I think of the waste now, it's sad. So we need to recycle our wastewater. And we need to avoid greenhouse gases in our giant landfills like Ghazipur and the other two, which are Bhalswa and Okhla, by not mixing our wastes, not mixing our domestic wastes. Until the 1970s, there was no need for any landfills. Farmers would come into the cities, fight over the dustbins to take the organic waste to their farms to make compost. Two things killed this practice. One was the Green Revolution, which threw absurdly subsidized urea at everybody and said, that's the answer, forget compost. And they never told the farmers that while nitrogen was a limiting nutrient in the 70s and urea helped it, that we should not at the same time make carbon the limiting nutrient which it is today. All our soils are depleted of carbon for lack of compost, lack of our food discards going back to the soil which grew them for us, which was happening for so many years. That's why the British never created any waste management. They created huge sewage, grass farms and so on, but never anything for solid waste because there was nothing like a solid waste. Only the urea subsidy and the plastic yug, when we discarded food items and we discarded plastic, saying we don't need this either, and we discarded them together. And now we are struggling to change people's habits and lifestyles to unmix these two. Because if you can keep your food waste unmixed from everything else, then both the streams become manageable. And Mr. Hande will tell you how much the livelihoods of the waste collectors will improve if they get clean, unsoiled, dry waste. So we also need to realize every single carry bag or anything that we chuck into our food waste and make it mixed waste ends up on a dump, creating greenhouse gas in the dump and also creating fires. There are endless fires on the dumps, and every carry bag is fueling those fires. And people say, I keep it separate, but the municipality doesn't collect it separate, because cities around the country have got in the habit of paying for waste collection by the ton. So no waste contractor wants to let a gram go and forces the collectors to mix what people give unmixed. So my only answer to that is, please don't give them anything to mix. Hold back your dry waste and donate it, sell it, whatever, to the nearest either waste picker or kabadi recycling shop and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Almitra. I wanted to come to you, Miles, because this whole issue of urbanization, growth of population, migration, etc., is becoming fairly bothersome because it is increasing the demand on existing resources astronomically. The growth of cities, our cities are not able to take the number of cars that are there, the roads are inadequate, water is running out, air quality has depleted significantly. You've done a lot of work in the area of smart cities, for instance. Now, if I were to bring you back to ask you a question on what is the kind of rethinking that we need to incorporate in planning, in the way we approach the astronomical increase in demand on our resources, what would you like to share with the audience?
To respond to, again, a very multidimensional set of problems that you outline in that question, is that I reflect on a few things that have been said in the last half an hour or so. And firstly, I think that the story about what happened in the 70s with waste and how farmers used to take the city wastes, and that changed, is that if we go right back to the early days of the environmental movement, the awareness that arose in probably notably parts of Europe and North America, and the principles around living sustainably, even though sustainability wasn't a word at the time, was this idea of, the waste hierarchy, where the first thing you do is you reduce consumption, and you reuse things. So I think that's still a lesson that needs to be learned, is how do we slow consumption? And in a city where you have incredible flows, mass flows of materials coming in, being consumed, and very short lifespan of things that once were long lifespan, the predominance of single-use products, especially in the packaging industry, compounds that. And that brings me to another point that was made earlier. The word that was mentioned was design. So it's a design problem, the waste problem. And I feel that if we rethink about the products that we purchase and we consume and use, if we go back up the food chain to where the ideas are conceived of how these products should exist and be deployed through manufacturing, distribution, retail, and to the customer, us, and used in our homes. If we rethink that, and I think there's some great examples starting to emerge in this area, we can reduce that burden on trying to deal with it in cities as a waste problem. One of the areas that I'm particularly interested in is consumer electronics and the ubiquitous nature of these things. We all have a smartphone, a computer in our pocket now. The technological change that has occurred just within the last decade is absolutely staggering in the way that, especially with, say, mobile communications technologies, has occurred. These are short-life products. Now, typically in countries like India, they usually cascade through ownership, where the brand new shiny product is bought at the premium price, but then it might then ultimately be handed down to a family member or on-sold as a second-hand product, and there might be a third, fourth and fifth user of that product. That's a good resource efficiency of that product. However, there are many other examples, and notably in the West, where we have a huge problem with short lifespan products, particularly consumer electronics. So just to recap on that, I would say that we need to learn the lessons of what we learnt back in the early days of the environmental movement, and that is this notion of the waste hierarchy, reduce and reuse. And equally, I believe that a lot of our problems are design problems, and I think that is the challenge in terms of how do we engage manufacturing industries, designers and the creators of these to really meaningfully address what is becoming a huge problem in our cities.
Thanks, Miles. Siddharth, let me come to you with to amplify a bit on the fact that it is a design problem and you need a design solution. But I'll start by saying that the time when I was growing up, the word kabadi really meant, had a very limited definition. I mean, you were talking about newspaper waste and, sometimes bottles, and but that's it. And suddenly, today, when we talk about waste, the definition has amplified itself. I mean, it's a society today where so much is disposable. And the waste has magnified itself to such a significant extent. So if I take you back to the work that you do with the Kabadiwallas, and we pick up what Miles was saying, that there is a problem for which you need a design solution, how do you see your work as a design solution, and what exactly is the problem that you are dealing with?
Thanks. I think from my side, it's a very interesting perspective that for me is, from a design perspective, what we're actually trying to do is redesign the supply chain. When you think about waste, one of the key issues, it's a logistics game. For any business person looking to get into waste management or any municipal authority looking to reduce the amount of money he's spending in waste management, it comes down to logistics. And typically what we have is a very centralized model for waste management where you try to organize collection at this very, very large level. You take that to a transfer station. That material then gets segregated there. You need some heavy machinery there, especially when you look at the Western model of waste management. What the Kabadiwalla offers really is a hyper-local micro transfer station. And suddenly the logistics cost it looks very different. So from my side, I think the design element really comes in the supply chain design of the recovery of different waste. So, for example, I was in Germany for a waste management conference, and everybody knows how Germany is a real leader in waste management. But the economics of waste management is completely different. The model of the collection is very different. So, for example, for your post-consumer waste from small and medium waste generators, you have curbside collection, right? Different kinds of bins. So I posed a question. I said, look, if we were to try to pick up a new material, multi-layer packaging, for example, how expensive would it be to do it in Germany versus do it in India, where one is dependent on heavy infrastructure and mechanized kind of processing? So, for example, if you put MLP in the plastic mix, you probably need a NIR scanner in your transfer station or in your plastic recovery facility that can pull it out and do something efficiently. Whereas in the informal sector and in India, in the developing world, you actually have human hands working across. You have waste pickers, you have kabadiwallas, you have larger aggregators, you have informal processors. And this is not a story of, oh wow, there's everything right about it. There's a huge issue of health and safety and risk and all of these kinds of things that needs to be addressed in compliance. But my belief is if you work with what already exists, which exhibits itself as a hyper-local waste management system, or a decentralized waste management system, you automatically align yourself more to circular economy principles. And that's the perspective that we started out with. So what's interesting for us right now is who's going to pay for this, you know what I mean? And we have seen some traction with brands. So we work with Unilever in India, we work with Danone in Indonesia, and from their perspective, they are looking at this as a cost to business. Before, when they talked about waste management, they kind of said, oh, it's a CSR activity or something. But right now, there's a lot of pressure globally, and brands are recognizing and making commitments to change the way their bottles are manufactured. And for example, 11 brands in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation have said that by 2025, I'm going to have 100% reused, recycled, or compostable packaging. And they are very excited about the informal sector just because it represents a cheap way of doing business, the most efficient, cheap way of doing business. So that's the kind of perspective that I'd like to share on this.
It's very close to when you talked about the Kabadiwallas and the informal sector. It reminded me of what Almitra said just a few seconds ago about small being beautiful. And we have, at the university that Miles is in, there's a lady by the name of Veena Sahajwala. And if you Google Veena Sahajwala, she's known as the woman who collects garbage. And in Veena's case, she makes steel out of garbage. And a very large number of the buildings, actually, in Singapore are made out of technology, which is Veena's technology. And GRIHA has invited Veena, and she would be speaking on, I think, the 13th at a GRIHA event. And if all of you are free and would like to listen to her, you could do so. She's also this year's Indian Institute of Science Fellow of the Year, a very celebrated scientist who works at the University of New South Wales, winner of the Prabhasi Bharatiya Samman Award as well. And much of her work is also now on electronic waste. And so if your mobile phone is no longer of much use, she plucks it open and extracts from there what can be used and recycled. Which brings me actually to, once again, to a debate which I'm hoping that Sumit, Siddharth, and Miles can help me out with, which is, you're all talking about some fantastic things that can be done. I'm not able to put my hand on a simple issue which Sumit alluded to, Siddharth alluded to. How do we build these partnerships where government, research institutions, corporates don't just see this as CSR, don't just see this as a philanthropic way of dealing with things, something to give back to society. You can actually take a hell of a lot out of it from what you've explained to me in terms of a business model. But how can GRIHA 10 now take this to the next level in terms of actually forging partnerships to be able to deal with what we are agreeing is a serious problem, which is waste management? Would you like to start, or Sumit would like to start, whichever one of you would like to start, Miles?
To be 31.
I think you need to put that one off, maybe. Or is it? Are they connected?
Yeah, okay. Can I answer this with 2 anecdotes so that we start getting questions from the audience as well, with your permission, Amit? I think the greatest gift we have as Indians is up here in our minds and the out-of-the-box thinking that we do all the time, which is what we expect from GRIHA 11 and from Terry as we move forward. One is the fact, taking on from what Miles said, and we discussed this just before the start of this session. I can give you an example from my village where I live. What we do with our cell phones, which we throw away. We use them as security cameras. These are powerful video security cameras. There is a software which connects 15 or some 17 cameras for $15 a year, all right? Which means we now have cameras hanging on every tree with a 5-watt solar panel to charge it. And we know, because we live on the fringe of Rajaji National Park, if there's an elephant moving around in my paddy field, right at home. So that village now just turns on its mobile phone and using the discarded phone of his 3rd son, like you said, the 4th use or the 5th use, as Miles said, he just uses it as a video camera. So those are thoughts that we can put together. And it's not necessary that they come from large organizations. They can come from individuals. I think, we like to laugh at Jugaad, but Jugaad is nothing to laugh about. It's a fantastic technology. Let's celebrate Jugaad. Coming to the second anecdote, the story is that, and I don't know how true this is, but one of the boys went to Japan and was working in a soap factory, and there was consumer complaint all of the time coming from the dealers that sometimes the boxes containing 24 soap cakes inside, some of those cake boxes inside were empty. So the Japanese people got very worried about it. I mean, you were sending 24 and you were getting 23 or 22. There were a lot of empty packets coming off the assembly line. And they put their entire research team to work. And they worked out laser scanners and IR scanners and weight measurements and God knows what else on the assembly line. Till they reached this Indian guy and asked him, "Do you have an idea?" He says, "Yeah, of course I have an idea. Come with me." So he goes to the assembly line where these boxes are getting filled with soaps, and he puts a large fan here, and the empty ones just blow off. As easy as that. So let's get back to our childhood, let's get back to the basics, and I'm sure we can find some good answers.
Siddharth, I'll sort of pass the floor on to you, but one of the things that worries me really is that we end up buying a lot of products, and actually these products are manufactured and sold by corporates. And the corporates actually contribute significantly to the amount of waste that's created. Now, all of a sudden, they are helping us get rid of that waste. So it's like having an illness and then dealing with that illness. How do we prevent the illness in the first instance?
So personally, how do we deal with that illness? I think that we really need to think about local systems, and we need to really understand the cost of this kind of what the costs are of this kind of neoliberal capitalism stage that the economy is going in. I think that if you look at my parents or my grandmother, for example, when the way they look at consumption is fundamentally different from how my generation looks at consumption, and that's a huge issue. It's something that's fueled by a particular narrative of what something to be developed is, and I think that's a big issue. That's a personal comment. From my company's perspective, however, we don't really care where the money comes from. Our mandate and our mission really is we want to bring the informal supply chain to make them visible and also improve their lives. And if that money comes from the municipality, from a grant, from the corporate, we recognize that the big players need to be aligned to this. And that's something for us, I think, that I'm personally very hopeful about what extended producer responsibility can do. I think the e-waste extended producer responsibility laws that came in 2016 were very problematic because they did not understand what the informal sector was. And the world is informal. I mean, the OECD says that 60% of work globally is informal. When demonetization hit, and I was in the waste management, and I was buying plastic bottles in Chennai at the time. Waste pickers found a way to get money. We were struggling it's a purely cash business. But the informal sector was so resilient in how it managed their cash flows. The first 2 months of demonetization, my wife and I didn't have money to go and buy vegetables, but waste pickers were getting money. And that's a testament to the supply chain being very robust. Now, what I think we should do from a partnerships perspective is we should really understand what the informal sector represents, and we need everybody to come together to speak about this jugaad kind of supply chain that's come up and understand what the strengths and weaknesses are, and whether a platform like GRIHA can provide that or wherever it comes from. That discussion is sorely lacking. I find it very funny actually that I do not know why I was the first person to actually run the first census of the informal supply chain in Chennai. We won this World Bank grant. I mean, we have such well-funded institutions here. I do not understand why informality was only really understood at the waste picker level. That's something of a this, I don't understand that. You know what I mean? I can speak about that for hours, but I find it so funny that this young researcher from some university, from some research won a small grant and actually mapped the supply chain, and then suddenly there's a lot of corporate interest. It's a very interesting kind of thing. But for me, just to come back to this partnerships element, I think we really have to tell the world what this informal supply chain is. Because when we think of what this could be 10 years down the line, I don't think this is just something that India can use for the circular economy. I think there's a lot of south-to-south learning that we can use for circular economy principles, as well as a lot of south-to-north knowledge about what the circular economy principles can be. So, for example, I was talking to a professor in Arizona State University, and we were talking about this idea of the informal supply chain. And we said, okay, what if we put an IoT bin in somebody's house? In Arizona, in one of the cities in Arizona, and he becomes a small Kabadiwalla. Can we actually think of that as hyperlocal resource supply chains, but actually transporting that knowledge from the developing world to the developed world in the next 10 years? That would be the most exciting thing.
Before I come to Miles, I just thought that I'll just pick up on this brief mention that you made on e-waste and request Almitra ji to share her thoughts on e-waste.
I totally agree with Mr. Hande that the e-waste rules leave a lot to be desired and are quite imperfect. because, for example, they include refurbishers, fixing old things and making them work either as surveillance cameras or as monitor to TV or anything else, or even just making 3 old desktops into 2 or 1 and so on. This is a very vibrant thing which a lot of informal people will do in their homes, garages and so on. It doesn't need to have manifests and tracking and so on. If we think about e-waste, why is everyone paranoid about it? There's nothing dangerous about a cell phone or a laptop. We let our toddlers play with them. There's nothing hazardous about dismantling them, selling the plastic, selling the iron or aluminum in it. The only hazardous part is the circuit board, and there's nothing hazardous about a circuit board. The only hazardous thing is the way the informal sector extracts copper from it. If you take a motherboard, the green ones, for example, multi-layer motherboards, circuit boards, they are 30% epoxy, 30% glass in the form of fiberglass, 30% copper in maybe 5 or 7 layers, and traces of gold, silver, and other noble metals or rare metals. And the informal sector burns them to get out the copper, creating a lot of highly toxic smoke, pans the ash in the river to get out any metal bits that may be remaining in the ash, and they use cyanide for, or even liquid mercury for extracting the gold. And when we ask them about it, they say, well, what's wrong with cyanide, leaving it in the drain? It kills all the cockroaches. That's their point of view. It may also kill people. They don't think about that. So what we need is a collection chain only for the circuit boards and upgrading the way the informal sector recycles this. If you take the definition of e-waste is anything with a battery or a plug. So in the West and even in the Indian rules, even a fridge or a washing machine would be e-waste because it contains some electronic circuitry. And in a 100 kg fridge or 200 kg fridge, there's only a 40-gram circuit board. So that's all the e-waste that really we need to worry about. And I would like to share with you how unfriendly our government is to the ease of doing business. We have about 300 e-waste recyclers, authorized ones. What needs to be done with the motherboards is to shred it and export it to just 6 or maybe 7 now companies in the whole world which recycle these. They add it as 10% flux along with copper or smelting. And then they use sophisticated methods to separate the noble metals out of the copper which gets left behind. But even companies that have to pay and bribe heavily to get their annual export permits, now it's reached a stage that for over a year, the file just doesn't move. They neither get a yes nor a no. Each company will have about 3 crores and several container roads locking up money and space, and the country is losing export revenue. For no earthly reason, no one wants to just take a decision about permitting exports, and no reason for why they don't do this. Now, in Roorkee, there is an e-waste company. I think it got 400 crores or something of IFC and you know, angel investor funding for it. But with all these difficulties, what is happening is enormous leakage into the informal sector. So nearby town of Moradabad, many of you may have read the down-to-earth analysis of that. It's got an air quality index of 500, a hell of a lot worse than Delhi. It's India's most polluted town. And this is because the brass smelters are used to melting down scrap brass, scrap copper, and so adding this and burning the motherboards is just one more thing. And it's so simple to not freeze the export permits, but simply to enforce material flow audit. How much did you get in? What did you get out? Where did it go? Just a material flow audit could stop the leakages, and we need to simplify the way we do business for e-waste.
Miles, just to come to you now, we've had a pretty interesting set of observations, comments, remarks by the panelists, and I wanted to throw it open to the audience, but I'm still not clear in my mind as to what might be the takeaways from this session. What is it that we are hoping to be able to recommend to GRIHA 10 in terms of their overall theme of fostering partnerships? How we recognize that there's a problem. We recognize that design solutions are necessary. We recognize that collaboration would be a great thing, but I'm not clear how we put all these pieces of the puzzle together and actually forge a partnership to deal with the problem. What are your thoughts?
Another challenging question from the chair. I wish I could offer some great examples of my own experience, but I think that the university sector in Australia has struggled with this very question for many years of how we engage with industry and the wider community on collaborative and productive projects and outcomes. It seems to me that there is parallel experiences, industry conferences probably that discuss this. In academia, we discuss this. At local, regional council, and even within communities, they discuss these matters. But how do we bring those conversations together and find some sort of commonality and I guess a process in terms of how to meaningfully engage or commence these partnerships and engage with looking at solutions. Just to throw another bit of popular terminology into the mix, and someone briefly mentioned this before, is design thinking. And I think as a designer myself, that is comfortable to me because I interpret that as meaning think like a designer. And I would say that that is probably a different way of thinking than perhaps, say, an engineer or a scientist might think, as opposed to the way a worker on an assembly line will think, such as solving the soap problem, which we heard about before. But design thinking is an interesting approach to this because it actually tries to say, well, let's not try to clearly understand everything about the problem and then come up with the specification and solve it, but why don't we try and engage with exploring what the opportunities are and the ways we could solve that. And that means prototyping solutions, starting small, making mistakes, learning from those mistakes, iterating, in other words, experimenting with different ways of combining and making solutions work. And I think that probably is the way forward. So, but bottom up in terms of seeing what works in local, regional, or specific industry sectors, and then learning from others and then building on those experiences. And perhaps that is the way forward, rather than a top-down, we're trying to get major corporations, university partnerships and so forth, and government working together, because we know that there has been many attempts at this and they aren't necessarily productive in the long run. So I would say a bottom-up approach would be worth exploring. Yeah.
I wanted to come to you, Siddharth, and to Sumit on, the work that you're doing is incredibly inspiring. And it's a great story to tell. But I read somewhere that if you don't tell your story and no one hears or knows about it, you really don't exist. So how do you tell your story? So Sumit, would you like to share with the audience, and Siddharth as well, how do you tell your story? How do you amplify your story so that it reaches the wider audience?
So that, can I? Yeah. So I think I'll go back to what I said earlier, make your story copy left. Let others tell your story, which is what happens at the end of these kind of sessions. We come with our stories and we pass on as much information as we have. And we hope that our stories are interesting enough so that people will carry them forward. That's the way it's been for thousands of years. Stories are never told by the same storyteller everywhere. What I heard from my granddad, he heard from his granddad. His granddad wasn't even alive when I was born and hearing those stories. So stories primarily need to be passed on. They need to be copylefted. Don't hold on to your story. That would be my take on this.
LinkedIn has been very good for me. No, I think that from my perspective, I came into this business world very, I Forrest Gumped my way into it. I mean, I really, my primary interest was in the informal supply chain. I felt that it was a very unrecognized. There was so much going on that wasn't being captured in academia. So actually, the first thing I did was I did a very solid lit review of everything that had been spoken about the informal sector, and I actually wanted to collect my data with understanding what the literature was saying. And I really connect with your point about design thinking. It's been absolutely critical for us in the development of our company and our products. Again, partnerships has also been very good for us. So Veolia, for example, it's been very interesting to see, especially with Veolia and Danone, the amount of interest they have in this idea has really given us a lot of purchase. It's again, I have a interesting. We kind of started our business before this curve of the circular economy conversation in India. So the first year when I was talking about what we were doing in the informal sector, I was meeting a lot of investors who just had no idea what we were doing, and it was a very tough kind of space. But we really kind of shattered the glass, the roof, I think, a little bit. Because we started getting a little bit of purchase once the whole EPR conversation going. So to come back to the conversation of how do we get the story out there, just be very active. I think one of the core roles of a CEO of a company, especially a social enterprise, is to go out and have these discussions and try to build relationships. Relationships for me has been something, I think because of my background, I understand the value of university relationships and academic relationships. So it has not been purely a business purpose. So I think keeping that aspect of who you partner with as well. Can you partner with the community? Can you partner with academia? Can you partner with corporates? And what aspects do they really kind of want? That's been something that's been very useful for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to throw the session open now to all of you. I must confess that for me, the stories that Miles shared, Siddharth, Sumit, and of course the outstanding Almitra ji have been extremely inspiring. And I think you can kickstart a strong discussion. We have about 20 minutes left. So, ma'am, you wanted to start off. But
Yeah.
could I request that you introduce yourself before you start?
Yeah, I'm Dr. Sunita Purushottam. I head sustainability for Mahindra Life Spaces. So my questions are for Siddharth, Almitra, Patel, and Sumit. So from Siddharth's perspective, the question is the materials that the informal sector is gathering. What if those materials stopped existing? That's the world that we are imagining. What happens to your supply? So that's a question for you. And ma'am, you mentioned that the construction and demolition waste rules are not being followed. What are the implications of that in terms of government fines, and how would government look at implementing that is a question for you. And for Sumit, actually, the offsetting of your vehicle, there are more pollutants other than carbon. So just carbon neutrality doesn't work. So that's the point I wanted to share. Of course, carbon neutrality of air travel and vehicle emissions that exists, but it's only part of the story. And to the point that you were making about bamboo, using bamboo, I'm interested. And how further can we build in terms of high-rise is the question for you.
Thanks. Could I request, if it's all right, if Almitra ji, you could start off by responding, and then Sumit, and then Siddharth.
I think we need champions. I think Siddharth mentioned that Unilever is taking the lead and helping. In the construction industry, we have so many large companies, this Jones, Lang, LaSalle, those types, who are designing big projects. They've come from abroad. They know how the waste management plans are done, how the waste is managed. I think they should voluntarily bring this kind of global culture to India as their contribution to the economy that gives them a space to grow. Because one sad thing that has happened in Bangalore, we have a stone crusher turned cementitious material recycler into M-sand. He goes to some of these major builders and they all say, we'll give you 1 truckload of concrete. Please give us a certificate that we are tied up with you. And they want to use this 1 truckload to get a green clearance or legitimacy for the next 2 years' worth of waste without actually giving him any waste, saying, you pick it up or pay us for the material and so on. So I think there is a great deal of hypocrisy in the construction industry also, which has to disappear, and we have to have individual company champions who want to do the right thing and do it and show the others that it can be done.
About high-rises. Well, let me put it this way. There was this architect called Buckminster Fuller. We've heard of him. He's the guy who designed the geodesic dome. He designed another thing called the Mile High Illinois building. Yeah, that's never been made. It's technically correctly designed. It's been put through all design softwares, and it is worth working on. But nobody really made the Mile High Illinois building because nobody really had the resources to do it. We've done 2 stories with bamboo. We don't have the resources to do any more than that. But technically speaking, bamboo as a cladding material, as a curtain wall material, can go up to any height you want. As a structural material, if you just look around you, there are 10-story buildings which are made with bamboo scaffolding. And then you take down the scaffolding and hail the pillars and beams. What are we talking about? So 10 stories we've seen in our own lifetimes. Should work perfectly fine. It just needs the right mind and the right resources for somebody to go out there and do it.
From my side, I think that what worries me more is the informal sector being excluded from collecting material rather than products being designed that where they have no role to play. I think for a lot of material streams, you are going to require end-of-life reverse collection and management and processing. So you take HDPE, PP, PET. These are materials that are very, very robust and very economical and are here to stay. Danone, for example, has built a bottle that's made of completely compostable plastic. But I think it's at 25x of the price of what a PET bottle is. So I think my side is more of how do we make sure that the informal sector actually has access to all the materials. So when you look at what they make money on now, it's metal, paper, and plastic. And I think the plastic can be a significant revenue generator for them going forward because of this sudden kind of deluge of global interest in managing plastic better. So I'm bullish on the role of the Kabadiwalla if the right policies are put in place, because at some point you're always going to need that supply chain of end of product. The product will have an end life, and it has to be, has to be pulled out, and a secondary raw material has to be made.
Anyone else in the audience? No? Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
This is a very general comment rather than a question, which is that the reason there is a linear sort of a linear economy which exists right now is because we have a very consumption-based mindset, and I feel like if we want to transition to a circular economy, the first thing we need to do is have a paradigm shift where we move away from this consumptionist mindset, and we move to where we start appreciating small is beautiful and all of that. So where do you think India currently is in terms of adopting like a circular model? I know the Ellen MacArthur Foundation came up with a proposal, but how close are we to actually like realizing this possibility? And do you have a comment on it? Like this is.
I don't know if any
as
of
a young professional, I'm an architect, and I see the pace of urbanization, and I see how the construction industry works, and I just don't see this happening right away. Whatever Almitra ji spoke of, I don't see this happening right away. So where do you think, what do you think our next step should be towards moving to a paradigm shift towards like a circular economy mindset?
I'll leave it to the panel to respond, but I must confess that I don't want to sound pessimistic or optimistic, just realistic, and say that I don't see any shift taking place from the very strong push towards consumerism, much as I will advocate Buddhist thoughts to everybody. But I think the manner in which corporates actually run our life is a reality. And consumerism is not likely to disappear other than for people perhaps of my age, and where we can tend to be less materialistic about things. But think about this way. Your telephone keeps changing every few months, and quite frankly, people are able to pay 70, 80,000 rupees to be able to make that change. You can probably decide that I'm not going to change it every few months, I'll change it every couple of years, but it still is. My salary when I started was 700 rupees per month. it today costs 76,000 rupees to buy a particular brand of a mobile phone. And are we going to stop becoming consumer-driven? I doubt very much, realistically. And much as I would love to read and advocate small is beautiful, it's not likely to happen in the foreseeable future. I don't know what the panelists think, but that's my view.
Can I add to what you said? Max, please.
I can't answer anything on behalf of India, of course. That would be ridiculous. But can I offer something for the Christmas shopping list? And that is a book that you're probably familiar with, and that is the William MacDonald book and Michael Braunhart, and where they talk about this notion of cyclic systems, technical nutrients, the man-made materials, and natural nutrients. And that book, the title of, it's just left my mind. You're familiar with it? Huh?
Cradle to Cradle.
Cradle to Cradle. Thank you, yes. Cradle to Cradle. Terrific book. And it's about 12 years old now, at least, I should think, but it's another one of these books which I think clearly articulates the way these materials can cycle in the economy, and written by an architect and a chemist, and I think that's a really good foundational read to really get you understand the concepts and the opportunities of a new way of thinking about resource use and consumption.
Just wanted to add, in fact, I think it's a brilliant question which you've put forward as an architect, as an upcoming architect maybe. And what Amit added to it, that we are industry driven. Have you ever thought as an architect why steel comes in 20 feet length? You design windows in 4 feet by 3 feet sizes. It doesn't fit in. Why does a sleeper of wood come in a 10 feet size? Because there has got to be wastage. You're paying for wastage. Really. The industry makes you pay for wastage. The only way to stop this is start designing 5 feet windows. Use the entire steel. You've got 9-inch bricks, and you've got every mason carrying a basuli where he breaks the brick into half. For what? What's going on here? Why can't design be put into it, like Siddharth just said, that let's design better. You know, so we need to get back to our architecture schools and tell everybody, look at the material list and design accordingly. We've done just in time, now let's put that to material uses and, you know, design for just the right kind of material. Let's, you know, outwit the industry. That's the only way to sort of stop waste, I would say. Yeah?
So this actually brings us back to where we started off from. Because, I mean, if you want to solve the problem and you recognize there's a problem, it has to be a collective aspiration to solve it. And I don't entirely agree with Sumit about taking on industry. I think we need to really find a way of working in collaboration, in partnership, because it's really our space, and it's collectively our space. And I'm not making a pitch for the university that Miles is part of, the University of New South Wales, but one of our most popular courses is a course on business and ethics. And this is a course that is studied across the border among different schools, where business does not work unless it is deeply rooted in ethics. And that's really the purpose of education, isn't it? To transform lives and to be able to create a just society. And if that's not what we are doing, it's really not worth it. But can we have another question? Yes, sir.
Not a question, basically, I'm from industry. So I just want to sort of defend, sort of bashing, maybe it's a little bit. I come from Covestro, which is the new name for Bayer, which is about a 14 billion euro company, which we make polyurethanes and polycarbonates. We are working very quietly and very effectively because Just an example is, some of the raw materials now are being made from carbon dioxide. And that's a long-term research which actually brought fruit now. And similarly, by 2025, and we are not the only ones, by 2025, there's many people, big industries, who have committed to say that they will make 100% of their raw materials from bio-based. So at the end of the day, by 2025, because it's not going to happen overnight. It's a time task. There's a time factor which is very much involved in this. And most of the big, large corporates have signed the SDGs. The SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think these 17 SDGs are very detailed. And when we have signed and we have committed, and there is a huge investment going into it. So it's probably that's the awareness is not so much, and it takes some time for things to percolate into India because there is a certain cost for it. Europe is able to pay us the cost for it because there is an R&D going into it. 10 years to develop one catalyst, so that carbon dioxide can be converted into a polyol. So it's happening, but there's a process, and we are investing. I just want to say that.
Yes, sir. No, the gentleman there.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm H. Kumar from CST in the issue of the environment and renewable energy. Circular economies depend on the decentralized system. Climate change is a human right. Climate change is a consumer right. We are facing the climate change very seriously in India, particularly in India. Air pollution, water pollution, and food pollution also now started. So how to make a circular economy? What is the paradigm shift for the circular economy? Use of application of solar technology, low carbon technology, other technology. What should the paradigm shift? Because the policy is there, but we are not adapting the things. Climate change, adaptation, mitigation. If you not adapt anything, how to mitigate anything? What is the paradigm shift?
I'm not certain I fully understood the question because I think water pollution and climate change are not the same thing. But I do believe there is water pollution, and I do believe that there is climate change. But I'm not entirely certain what the question is, sir. But if anyone in the audience has understood the question and could explain it to me, probably one of us in the panel could respond.
So, from what I gather, what Sir just said, just to give an example, you just said that corporates rule our world right now, right? Corporates rule the world. So for us, everything that we consume is made by a corporate or something like that. Anything in the house has been made by a corporate, and that's the way the urban dwellers, they live. Now what he's trying to tell us is that in order for us to move into the idea of a circular economy, how do you have a shift in the thinking, a shift in things like packaging and everything else which actually revolves around circular economy when we are actually in so much into the idea of linear economy? So what do you do? How do you bring that change? So that's probably the question he's trying to ask.
Maybe, Siddharth, I think I'd asked this question and you had responded. Maybe you'd like to elaborate a bit, because a lot of the waste that is generated by corporates. Yeah. And yet it is corporates who are now working with NGOs and others in trying to manage that waste. So in the first instance, they create the waste, and then you have step 2, where they're becoming great partners to get rid of that waste. What's your response to that?
Again, personally, for me, I think that, when you think about, or at least for me, when I think about the sustainability movement, when it first started out in North America and Europe, there's a very philosophical component to what does our society look like and how do we live our lives, right? And what that actually kind of matured to was one of sustainability technology. It became a tech-heavy, intervention-heavy space. And we're seeing that soon with the circular economy. We work very closely with a consulting group out of Copenhagen. And one of their biggest gripes actually over the last 3 years, as they see the circular economy discussion progress, is it denatures into one of philosophy, into one of technology. So if you look at circular economy, everybody's talking about bio-based something or this or that, or some new opportunity to do something with this. My company, we're talking about the supply chain element and all of that kind of stuff. So I think starting with that is a very is an interesting starting point. There's a reason why corporates now understand that plastic they have to manage waste as a cost to business rather than an NGO perspective, and that's because of global pressure, driven by NGOs and citizens and things like this. And I think that's something that we always have to do. When I started out waste management, I actually started out in college organizing beach cleanups. And that was my entry point from an activist perspective. Why is there so much waste on the beach? What can we do? And then we started cleaning it up and said, okay, we're just taking this and sending it to the landfill. What can we do? And my journey has brought me specifically to this idea of social entrepreneurship, where it's profit and purpose. And I think that if you really are serious about it, you can do a lot of good. One of my heroes is the CEO of Danone. His name is Emmanuel Faber. Just have a look at some of his talks. He's the head of a $30-40 billion company, saying to the world that the future of food systems will be local. That's something that nobody has really said before. And I think that this kind of leadership is really required. For me, again, personally, 2-3 things just to say. I think that social entrepreneurship and public pressure is always important. But to the point of the big dogs, you have to work in that. You have to work in certain frameworks. For me, social entrepreneurship is something that allows me to sleep at night.
So, I am a budding waste management enthusiast as well, and I pretty much look up to you. So what you just said is the future is local. Aren't we going back in time? Weren't things local previously some time back? It's just sad. I mean, I feel so sad that I'm a 23-year-old guy and I might have kids someday. And when they would have never seen those worlds in which respected Amit's Almitra ma'am, you guys were there when things were local actually. Aren't we coming, you're suggesting that we go back to those times?
No, it's very true. I think there's a lot of anger, or I don't know what the word is, even when with Sumit, I think you can say a lot about this, and we can all say a lot about this, is what we're actually saying is, hey, let us do what let us operate on, India, for example, it's a long history of circularity. I go to a lot of these conferences in Europe, for example, and we talk about the circular economy, and it's tough for me to locate myself, because I find myself in a very narrow perspective, not able to kind of reflect this huge history of local circular systems that we've had, but now we're changing, and it's kind of this kind of smashing of two perspectives. You know what I mean? And that the same thing happened in the sustainability space, by the way. The whole sustainability discussion, the way it came down into the Indian perspective, was a very Western, one-directional kind of a thing. And I think that that's something that excites me a lot. Now, with digital media, with social media, we can have a two-way conversation. And I think that maybe there's something exciting about that as well. But I think Sumit maybe.
Good that you've voiced your concern. I think in the coming days, global is local. Think about it. Are we really talking about local as a mohalla, or as a town, or as India, or as Southeast Asia, or as the whole world? So as you become 23 and 24 and 28, you will see that local is more and more global. That's number one. Number two, when we talk about a circular economy and the paradigm shift that the other gentleman there said, the paradigm shift will always happen in thought, never in technology. Technology is bettered. Technology never has a paradigm shift, because you don't suddenly wake up one morning and say, hey, this, I left it a glass bottle yesterday and this has become a polycarbonate bottle this morning. It doesn't happen that way. You have to go out and make a polycarbonate bottle. You have to go out and make the polycarbonate itself. But thought can provide you with paradigm shift. To talk about circular economy is first and foremost to keep going back to where we began. That is circular. If that means going back and learning from your dad or your granddad or your local villager or whatever, do that.
Exactly, going back in time.
Going back in time. And there is a lot of knowledge there. There may not be studies. So that's why we are in such a great group here today. The studies can be done, but the knowledge exists. We just need to discover that knowledge and put it together. I'll give you, with permission from those who don't understand Hindi, I will give you a very small example. अगर आप एक किसान से पूछते हैं ना कि तुम क्या उगाते हो, वो कहता है चारा उगाता हूँ. फिर क्या करते हो? भैंस को खिलाता हूँ. भैंस क्या करती है? दूध देती है, बच्चे को पिलाता हूँ. और क्या करती है? गोबर देती है. क्या करते हो? उसको चारे में डाल देता हूँ. फिर चारा उग जाता है. You can't get more circular than that. We have been a circular economy, like he just said that we are a circular economy for eons together. I don't see the reason for us to get scared. Technology scares us. Please don't get scared. It's supposed to be a tool. It's supposed to be a good thing for us. So there is a lot out there for you as you become globally local. Have I been able to answer that? Yeah? Thank you.
Sorry, if I can just add
Yep.
one very quick thing also. I think we also have to, just maybe as a word of caution, I think this idea of nostalgia, at least in my perspective, is something dangerous as well. Yeah. Like when you think about like dissemination strategies, right? There are two essentials. There's a scale strategy and there's a spread strategy. Corporates do scale very well, you know, and you can make great arguments that, oh look, from last mile delivery they've done more than what the government has done in certain areas, perhaps, you know. So we always, I don't think the idea is to villainize certain groups of people. We all have to work together. We all have to build this partnership, and everybody is adding a lot of value. How do we bring everything together to fit some kind of thematic area or something? Maybe the circular economy is the defining perspective, that we all kind of rope in all these ambitions that we have together of the kind of place that we want to live in. And companies are going to play a key role in that, right? And it's very important to engage on those elements.
Yeah, I just thought I'd add and say that, you know, I really am not a big believer that we're going back in time and stuff like that. I do believe that, you know, I mean, there's a problem and you have to find a solution. And that's all that one is engaged in. And in that finding of the solution, you find what is the best possible solution. And if it requires that you go back in time to find that solution, that's exactly what you do. But very often as we grew during our past 70 plus years, there was a time period in which we borrowed so heavily from other cultures, we adopted rather than adapted. And therefore you had this spurt of literature that did come up about talking about alternative development models, etc. But at the end of the day, all you're trying to do is to find a design solution to a problem. And I think that needs to be the focus. Not a focus to say that this kind of solution is villainous and therefore we are going back to where we all started from. And quite frankly, I don't understand words like circular economy at all. I understand that economies have to be sustainable. That's what I understand. And at the end of the day, it needs to be able to generate wealth sufficiently enough to be inclusive. Generate wealth sufficiently enough to be able to create a just society. And you have a myriad of problems that you deal with. You cannot deal with these problems in an antagonistic manner with regard to each and every one of the stakeholders who are all part of the same circle. I mean, that's my point of view. If there are no other questions. Yes, sir. I also wanted to mention that it was a bit unfair of me. We started today's session by talking about construction and building waste. And my understanding is that there is a member of the audience over here who actually has significant expertise in this particular area. And if the person is still around over here, would you raise your hand? Yes. I will give the floor to you, sir, so that we can complete, if you like, the circle. But before that, sir, the floor is yours.
Just some questions on the paradigm shift. I think the consumer activism would be a very important thing. But why is there not a Green Party in India?
I have no idea.
You have one in Australia?
Yes, we do.
We do. You have one in the US. You have all over the world. Probably except in China and India. No, the paradigm shift could come if the Green Party survives. Anyway, that's just the thing.
Hello, sir. I am Sanjay. I also totally agree with what Sumit sir was saying, that we should go for copyleft, not for copyright. So whatever little that we have done in CND, we are always open for everyone. Basically what we do, whatever junk that we receive, we try on an economic scale to first segregate concrete from the mixable because it has more value. And economically to the portion that we are able to separate concrete from the mixable, and whole bricks which can be again reused in the building material, we try to do that. And concrete then we process separately to make non-load bearing products out of it, like pavement block, curbstones, and other things. And the mixed one which we are not able to separate economically, that we again try to convert it back into concrete blocks where they are used as a substitute of bricks. This total Supreme Court NXC has been built by bricks made out of recycled CND waste only, and now slowly government...
That deserves a clap.
Thank you, sir. So we invite everyone, whosoever, I mean budding architects and others, so that they can integrate this concept of reuse of CND waste, so that nothing goes waste. Everything is converted back into building material. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the wonderful thematic speaker, Ms. Almitra Patel. I think Miles from the University of New South Wales, Siddharth and Sumit have been simply outstanding, as indeed each and every member in the audience has been. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Amit, for being such a great moderator. And I think we are all highly impressed with the young man there. And can I propose that we start thinking whether this circular economy should actually become co-eccentric economy, keeping the center where it was, but growing bigger. I think that's the point you made very well. Thank you very much for that.
The thing is, what sir just said, going back in time is something that doesn't sound bad at all. My own concern is, can it happen? We're moving so fast, we're moving so forward with the time. If the solutions of the cow example which you gave, cow is considered to be holy for several reasons. I mean, we're moving so fast. Can we ever go back to time?
I'm sorry for interruption. Can you take it offline? Like, yeah, we have to wind it up right now. On behalf of the Griha Council, I would really like to congratulate everyone here on the panelists as well as the audience, because they really did the justice to the session topic for unwinding the circular economy and bringing up all the perspectives of it. So now I just request our secretary from Griha Council, Mr. Shabnam Basi, to kindly present a small token of appreciation to all our panelists for your presence today. So, all right. Sorry, ma'am? Yes. So today we are giving up paintings. So today we are giving the paintings that showcases Gonda art, which comes from the belief that good images bring good luck. They will take an individual one. So these paintings showcases Gonda art. The Gondas are the major community tribal of central India. The artists have used natural colors derived from charcoal, colored soil, fan saps and leaves and cow dung. This mystical art forms is created by putting together dots and lines. Mr. Mr. Amit Dasgupta? All right, yes. Ma'am, after you. Mr. Millie Spark? Mr. Millie Spark, yeah. Mr. Siddharth Hande? Mr. Amit Dasgupta, sir? One for you as well. I request the panelists to come forward so we can have a group picture.